Okay, so let's unpack this. You know that specific feeling. Maybe you felt it in the break room at work when a certain topic comes up.
Oh, yeah.
Or maybe you're at a family Thanksgiving and a younger cousin starts talking politics and you realize the ground hasn't just shifted, it's completely gone.
Right, like you missed a meeting where all the rules changed.
Exactly. I mean, 10, maybe 15 years ago, the social contract in the West was pretty clear. It was basically live and let live.
Tolerance. That was the gold standard.
Yeah, you do your thing, I do mine. We treat each other with basic dignity and we go home to our families. But today, it feels completely different.
It really does.
It feels like tolerance isn't just insufficient anymore, it's actually treated as an insult. The demand isn't leave me alone. The demand is much louder.
It's aggressive.
Very aggressive. And frankly, for a lot of guys listening to this deep dive right now, it feels targeted. It feels like you are being penalized not for what you do, but for what you refuse to say.
And that distinction right there between what you do and what you're practically forced to say, that is exactly why we are looking at this specific source today.
Yeah.
It's an ebook called Celebrate, or Else. Why Woke Anarcho-Tyranny Communists Forced Degeneracy, First Tolerance, then Acceptance, Celebration, and Participation.
I made quite the title right now.
He definitely is not pulling any punches here.
No, he's really not. The author is Conrad Riker, and he's arguing that we have totally moved past the era of tolerance and into an era of forced participation.
He calls it a one-way toll booth, which we'll get into because it's a fascinating concept.
We absolutely will. And before we get into the actual gears of this, because we have a ton of ground to cover today.
There's so much ground.
Yeah, from the Frankfurt School to corporate capture and even the legal warfare against fathers. But I want to frame this for you, the listener, right up front. If you are a man who feels like the walls are closing in.
Like you're suddenly the bad guy.
Right. The bad guy simply for existing, working hard, and holding the exact same traditional values your grandfather held. If you want to understand how this culture war was engineered, not just that it's happening, this deep dive is for you.
It's essentially a field manual.
It is. And because we can really only scratch the surface here, if you want the full arsenal of receipts, the legal cases, the historical documents, the actual strategy guides that Riker claims are being used against you.
You really need the book.
You do. You need to go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books immediately and buy this ebook, Celebrate or Else.
Seriously, consider it a survival guide for the modern era.
Yeah, buy it today. And do not forget to hit that like and subscribe button on our show right now so you don't miss any of our deep dives.
And you can also find the author's ongoing work and analysis on Substack. His handle is @ConradNRiker.
@ConradNRiker on Substack. Definitely go follow him. Okay, so let's dive right into the central thesis here. Riker outlines a specific timeline. He says this didn't just happen overnight.
Right, it was a very deliberate progression. He breaks it down into 4 distinct stages. So first you have tolerance.
Which was the 90s, early 2000s.
Exactly, the whole please just let us exist phase. But then it shifted to acceptance.
Right, the you must agree that what we are doing is good phase.
Yes. And then came celebration. You must publicly cheer for us.
Yeah, and finally, where Riker argues we are right now.
Forced participation.
Forced participation. You must take part in the ritual or you lose your livelihood.
And that last part, the losing your livelihood part, that is not hypothetical at all. Riker opens with this case study that is, honestly, it's genuinely disturbing.
Because it could literally happen to anyone listening to this.
Exactly. It's the story of John Lee.
Tell us about John Lee.
So this was back in 2022. John Lee was a principal engineer at Cisco.
Okay, so a serious professional, Fortune 500 company.
Right. A guy with a family, a mortgage, a really long and successful career.
And usually, you know, when you hear about someone getting fired in this current corporate climate, you kind of assume they did something pretty egregious.
Yeah, like they harassed a coworker or used a slur.
Right, created a hostile work environment, something like that.
But that's what makes this case the perfect example of Riker's participation phase. Lee didn't harass anyone. He didn't attack anybody.
He was fired for what they called exclusionary behavior.
Exclusionary behavior.
Which honestly just sounds like HR speak for we don't like your vibe.
Well, it's actually more specific and honestly more dangerous than that. Lee wrote a post on his personal blog.
Personal blog, not on company servers.
No, not on company time. And he wasn't referencing any specific employee at his company. He was just criticizing mandatory pride mandates and the ideology behind them in a general sense.
Wow.
But Cisco's stance was effectively that silence or even private dissent expressed totally outside of work, creates an unsafe environment.
So the boundary between, employee John and private citizen John,
Vaporized. It is totally gone.
that is wild.
Riker calls this the one-way toll booth. In the past, tolerance was a two-way street. I tolerate you, you tolerate me.
Right.
But now, it's a toll booth. To enter the marketplace, to hold a job, to just participate in society, you have to pay the toll.
And the toll is vocal compliance.
Exactly. If you don't pay the toll, you don't work.
He also brings up another really well-known case, the baker in upstate New York, Charlie Balello.
Right.
Now, I remember the headlines about this, but Riker points out a legal nuance here that I totally missed at the time.
Most people missed it, honestly, because the media kind of buried it. So Balello was fined $135,000.
Huge fine.
Massive. And the narrative was Baker refuses to serve transgender person.
Right. That's what we all heard.
But Riker points out that's actually false. Balello was perfectly happy to sell the customer cookies, brownies, a standard cake, whatever.
So he was willing to serve the person.
Yes. What he refused to do was create a custom cake with a very specific message that said, "Congratulations on becoming a woman."
Ah, okay, so that's the distinction between service and speech.
Yeah, that's right.
He's saying, I will serve you a product, but I will not write your ideological message.
Right. But the court ruled that distinction does not matter. Refusing to actively celebrate the transition was ruled as discrimination.
So Riker argues this sets a terrifying legal precedent.
Compelled speech. It's no longer enough to just not hate somebody. You must actively affirm them. Silence or neutrality is no longer an option.
Which leads us perfectly to the how of all of this, because Riker is adamant in the book, and this is the part that usually gets you labeled a conspiracy theorist.
Oh, for sure.
But he says this didn't just happen by accident. We didn't just casually drift into this culture where up is down. He calls it engineered.
Right. And this is where we have to get a little technical. But it's so important because it explains literally everything you see on the news today.
If you want to understand why your corporate HR department sounds exactly like a radical sociology professor,
You have to understand the Frankfurt School.
the Frankfurt School. Now, this is a term that gets thrown around a lot in conservative circles, but let's break it down based on the source. What actually is it?
So, early 20th century, you had these Marxist theorists looking at the West, and they were really confused.
Because the revolution wasn't happening.
Exactly. Marx predicted the workers would rise up in violent revolution and overthrow the rich. But in the West, the workers were forming unions, buying cars, buying houses.
They were relatively happy,
Right. The violent economic revolution failed in the West.
so they needed a new plan.
They did. Enter Antonio Gramsci. He came up with the concept of the war of position.
War of position.
Right. He argued that you can't win a shooting war against Western civilization because the foundational culture is just too strong. So you have to capture the institutions that create the culture instead.
The schools.
The universities, the media, the courts, and eventually the corporate HR departments.
The long march through the institutions.
Precisely. It's a century-long operation. But the real heavy hitter that Riker highlights, and this is a critical piece of the puzzle, is a guy named Herbert Marcuse.
Okay, tell me about Marcuse.
In 1965, he wrote this incredibly influential essay called Repressive Tolerance.
Repressive tolerance.
I mean, that sounds like an oxymoron.
It's meant to be. Marcuse argued that pure tolerance, treating all ideas equally, actually favors the status quo.
Okay.
He said if you treat all ideas fairly, the traditional conservative ideas would always win because they were already established and made sense to people.
Right.
So, to create a liberated leftist society, he argued, you have to embrace a deliberate double standard.
The double standard.
Yes. You must be deeply intolerant to the right, silence them, deplatform them, and completely tolerant only of the left.
Wait, so when people jokingly say so much for the tolerant left when they get censored,
Yeah.
they aren't just pointing out hypocrisy, they're actually describing the literal playbook. That is Riker's exact point. It's not hypocrisy, it's hierarchy. Under Marcuse's theory, silencing traditional values is actually a moral duty.
Wow.
It's a feature, not a bug. They aren't trying to be fair. They are trying to win.
That completely explains the modern censorship complex. But Riker goes even deeper into the ultimate target of this march. And this is wild. He says the target isn't just capitalism or the government, it's the family.
Specifically the father.
Yeah.
Riker brings up another theorist from this era, Wilhelm Reich.
Okay.
Reich believed that the nuclear family was what he called a fascist microcosm. He literally viewed the father figure as a miniature Hitler.
A miniature Hitler. I mean, for what? Telling your kid to eat their vegetables and do their homework.
In their theoretical framework, yes. The theory is that the family unit teaches a child to respect authority, to value tradition and lineage.
Right.
If a child respects their father, they will naturally respect the state and the church in a traditional sense. So to create a new revolutionary subject, you have to completely break the authority of the father.
Because if the child answers to the state instead of their dad,
Then the revolution is secure.
that makes the current quote-unquote war on masculinity make a whole lot more sense.
Really does.
It's not just about stopping toxic behavior. Riker is arguing it's about removing a structural, biological barrier to state power.
And Riker outlines how this has led to a systematic pathologizing of manhood. Just look at the American Psychological Association, the APA.
What did they do?
In 2019, they released these new official guidelines that labeled traditional masculinity ideology as inherently harmful.
Harmful.
Yeah, they explicitly linked typical male traits like stoicism, competitiveness, and dominance to poor mental health.
But wait, stoicism and competitiveness, aren't those the exact traits that built literally everything around us?
That's Riker's counter-argument.
Skyscrapers, bridges, the power grid, winning world wars.
Exactly. Riker says these are the precise traits that build and protect civilization. But the APA guidelines treat them like a mental illness.
And obviously this trickles straight down into the education system.
Riker actually calls modern schools re-education camps.
He cites a really crazy example from Oregon, right?
A school district in Oregon that was giving fifth grade boys journals and making them write essays about their harmful male traits.
Fifth graders. These kids are what, 10, 11 years old?
Just plain tag.
Yeah, they're just little boys. But they're being told their nature is toxic.
And this creates what Riker identifies as the double bind. It's a psychological trap set for young men.
How does that work?
Well, if a boy acts like a normal boy, roughhousing, competing, being stoic, he's labeled toxic and he gets punished.
Right.
But if he conforms and he shows weakness or vulnerability, he's still often mocked by society or seen as pathetic. There is literally no correct way to be a male in this new system.
And the societal results of this are just catastrophic.
The stats that Riker brings up are brutal. He cites the Journal of Child Psychology, noting that boys raised without fathers in the home are 3 times more likely to be diagnosed with gender dysphoria.
Wait.
Yeah. When you remove the strong male role model, Riker argues you don't get liberated children. You get confused, vulnerable children.
And then, as if that wasn't enough, you have the corporate layer stacked on top of this, what Riker calls the male apology tour.
Oh man, you've probably sat through these corporate meetings.
We all have.
Yeah.
The ritual acknowledgement of your inherent privilege.
Right. And Riker has a very sharp rebuttal to this in the book. He asks, privilege. Are you talking about the privilege of dying in foreign wars? The privilege of making up 94% of all workplace fatalities?
94%.
Yeah. He argues that the whole concept of privilege is just a rhetorical cudgel used to demoralize the exact demographic of men who literally keep the lights on and the water running.
Speaking of keeping the lights on, let's shift gears and talk about what happens when these Marxist theories actually achieve institutional capture.
Because it's not just abstract philosophy anymore.
No, it has massive real-world consequences. Riker uses the recent collapse of Silicon Valley Bank as a prime example.
SVB. This is the ultimate get woke, go broke principle in action. Riker makes a compelling case that SVB didn't fail because of some complex math error.
No.
They failed because of a massive priority error. The leadership became totally obsessed with ESG, environmental, social, and governance scores, and DEI metrics.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion. He actually calls modern HR departments the commissars of the new regime.
It's a very Soviet comparison, but it really fits the dynamic.
Explain that.
Well, in the USSR, the commissar was a political officer who was embedded in the military, and they had absolute veto power over the actual military commander.
Just to ensure ideological purity.
Right. And today, Riker argues the HR director has that same veto power over the CEO or the chief engineer. They don't serve the company's profit margin or product quality, they serve the ideology.
And with SVB, they literally didn't have a chief risk officer for months leading up to the crash.
Nope. But you can bet they had a fully staffed DEI department planning Pride events.
Unbelievable. But it's not just the banking sector. Riker points to the military, which honestly is arguably the most concerning chapter of the entire book.
It really is. Think about the shift. We went from don't ask, don't tell in the 90s.
Which was basically a pragmatic compromise about privacy.
Right. To the 2023 Pentagon, actively funding gender transitions for service members and hosting drag shows on naval bases.
It's a total inversion of purpose.
Riker contrasts the old military focus, which was strictly on lethality and merit, with the new mandatory slogan, diversity is our strength.
And his argument against that is pretty blunt.
Extremely blunt. He says bullets do not care about diversity, bullets only care about competence. And when a nation prioritizes social ideology over combat lethality, that nation loses wars.
Period. So we have the education system, the banks, the military. And enforcing all of this compliance across the board is what Riker calls the digital panopticon.
This brings us right back to that toll booth metaphor.
Yeah.
In China, they have an explicit government-run social credit system. If you jaywalk or criticize the ruling party, the government literally stops you from buying a train ticket.
But Riker argues the West is doing the same thing, just privatized.
Exactly. We don't need the government to track us because LinkedIn algorithms, Google, and pre-Elon Twitter do it for them.
There is a line in the book that really stuck with me. We're not being oppressed by tanks. We're being nudged into submission by autocomplete.
It's so insidious. Think about it. If you refuse to put pronouns in your corporate bio, maybe the algorithm just quietly shows your profile to fewer recruiters.
You'd never even know.
Right. If you post a traditional family opinion on Facebook, you just get shadow banned. You aren't arrested in the middle of the night. You just disappear from the public square.
It's a soft totalitarianism. It makes you police your own speech because you're terrified of being financially unpersoned.
Which is incredibly effective.
But the absolute sharpest edge of this whole ideological wedge, and I think the one that is going to make every single father listening to this deep dive furious, is the transgender issue regarding children.
Yes.
This is where the rubber finally meets the road on parental rights.
And this ties directly back to what we were talking about with the Frankfurt School, the ultimate goal of separating the child from the parents. Riker spends a lot of time discussing California law AB 1955.
Break that down for us.
This is a law that actively prevents schools from telling parents if their own child changes their gender identity or their name at school.
Just pause and think about that. The school bureaucracy knows a massive, life-altering medical and psychological fact about your 6-year-old child.
And they are legally prohibited from looping you in.
The implication is terrifyingly clear.
The state owns the child. You, the parent, are just a temporary guardian until the state decides it knows better.
And then Riker gets into the medicalization aspect of this.
Right, the pushing of puberty blockers, which Riker plainly refers to as chemical castration. And he brings up international precedents too, like the Child Autonomy Directive in the EU.
There is that specific story from Sweden he highlighted that blew my mind.
Yes, and this is a crucial example because Sweden is always held up by the media as this progressive utopia.
Right.
A Swedish father was formally investigated by state social services. And do you know what his crime was?
Failed them.
He told his 6-year-old son that boys do not have periods.
A basic biological fact.
A literal biological fact.
Yeah.
But in the eyes of the Swedish state apparatus, refusing to affirm the new gender ideology was viewed as a danger to the child's mental health.
The demand is deny objective reality or we will take your children away.
That is the ultimatum.
Which brings us to a really fascinating real-world comparison that Riker makes towards the end of the book. He contrasts two totally different futures for Western civilization by looking at Sweden and Hungary.
Yeah, he's traveled extensively to both countries.
And the contrast he paints is just stark.
It's night and day. In Sweden, he describes a society that has gone all in on the ideology. Gender-neutral parenting is the absolute norm.
But the result isn't this promised utopia of happiness.
Not at all. He documents incredibly high rates of male loneliness. And even worse, a phenomenon where native Swedish women are deeply pressured into what he calls intersectional loyalty.
Meaning what?
Meaning they are pressured to ignore their own physical safety regarding the massive spikes in crime from immigration just to avoid appearing racist or intolerant.
Wow! And then he looks at Hungary.
Hungary is the exact inverse. They looked at the Western model and went the complete opposite direction.
How so?
They actually have constitutional definitions protecting marriage as strictly between one man and one woman.
Okay.
Their public history textbooks are designed to teach children pride in their nation and their ancestors, rather than historical guilt.
And the statistical outcomes.
They are mind-blowing. Riker notes that in Hungary, 82% of youth identify as heterosexual.
82%. And in Sweden.
Only 58%.
58%.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a statistical impossibility without massive top-down social engineering. You do not get a swing that huge in a single generation naturally.
No, you don't. Riker sums up the comparison perfectly. He says, one country is raising strong citizens, the other is raising confused, medicated subjects.
Mez. Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting for the listener. If you are hearing all this, you might be feeling what the internet calls black-pilled.
It sounds incredibly hopeless.
Yeah, you feel like the institutions are totally captured, the laws are literally written against you, the whole culture is hostile to your existence. But Riker does not end the book on a downer.
No, he doesn't. He actually pivots to a very aggressive, very practical call to action.
He calls it the make me attitude.
I loved this section. It's simple, but it is purely defiant. It's all about absolute noncompliance. Riker argues that men in the West have been deeply conditioned to be polite, to go along, to get along.
Right.
And that politeness is now being weaponized against us. He writes, real men don't trade their integrity for comfort.
So what does that actually look like in practice, like on a Tuesday morning at the corporate office?
It means when HR sends that email asking you to put your pronouns in your signature block, you don't make a big screaming scene. You don't do it.
You just ignore it.
Exactly. Yeah. If they demand you wear a pin or celebrate a month you fundamentally disagree with, you just politely decline. You look them in the eye and say, no, thank you.
You stop apologizing for existing.
Yes. Stop apologizing.
But we have to acknowledge that is risky. I mean, you could end up exactly like John Lee at Cisco.
It is extremely risky.
Yeah.
Riker doesn't sugarcoat the danger of pushing back. But his core argument is that the alternative is infinitely worse.
Because the alternative is losing your soul and eventually losing your children and your civilization.
Right. He says this counter-revolution isn't about violence or screaming on the internet. It's about three things: presence, purpose, and principle.
And he brings it all the way back to the role of the father.
Because that is the ultimate rebellion.
Yeah.
If the Marxist system wants to destroy the father figure, then being a strong, present, unapologetic father is literally the most revolutionary act you can commit right now.
Don't let the algorithm or the iPad raise your kids.
No. Don't let the captured school system indoctrinate them. You have to build the fortress at home.
The future belongs to the builders, the ones who don't wait for permission to lead. That line from the book really stuck with me.
It's powerful.
It completely shifts the mindset from being a victim of the culture to being an architect of a new one.
Exactly. Stop complaining about the institutions they are destroying and start focusing all your energy on what you are building.
Look, we have covered a massive amount of ground today, but I promise you, we have really only given you the barest outline of this book.
Not even 10% of it.
Right. If this conversation resonated with you today, if you're driving your truck or sitting at your desk nodding along thinking, finally someone actually put it into words,
Wow.
you owe it to yourself and your family to get the full manual.
Absolutely. Do not wait. Go to Amazon Kindle or Google Playbooks right now. Search for Celebrate or Else by Conrad Weicker. Buy the ebook. Read it.
Frame it as an investment in your sanity and the future of your kids.
And here is a small thing you can do that actually matters a lot in this digital panopticon we talked about. Leave a 5-star review once you buy it.
Oh, that is huge.
The big tech algorithms actively try to bury books like this. They try to hide this information from men who need it. A 5-star review is a massive signal boost.
It helps other red-pilled men find the truth. Riker specifically asks for this in the book to help break the silence.
And you can and should follow the author directly to cut out the middleman. He's at Conrad N. Riker on Substack, Twitter, and YouTube. Get the intel straight from the source.
Do not let the autocomplete nudge you into silence, guys. Riker's message is ultimately one of extreme clarity. You are not crazy.
You're just awake.
You are awake in a world that has gone intentionally insane. And this book brings all the receipts to prove it.
And it reminds you that every single day you have a choice. You can celebrate their ideology, or you can look them in the eye and say, make me.
I know exactly which one I'm choosing. Thank you for listening to this deep dive, everyone. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button right now so you never miss our next analysis.
Before we go, I'll just leave you with this final thought to mull over. If the traditional family really is the ultimate target of all these ideological shifts, what happens to a society when the state finally succeeds in becoming the sole parent? It's something you really need to prepare for.
A chilling thought, but exactly why we need builders right now. We'll see you all next time.
Stay strong.